Welcome to the Capital News. I am your host, Alex Karitis. Today is April 22nd, 2019. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope everyone enjoyed hopefully it was a long weekend, an Easter weekend, and hopefully everybody enjoyed their times with friends and family. So welcome back to the Capital News. Glad to have you with me today. So a few stories that I want to touch on today is obviously we're going to do a brief update on the Mueller report and all that madness because that was obviously the talk of the town. Given its release last Thursday, we knew this was going to happen. We knew this was going to be a three-ring circus. It's in town, and it ain't going to be packing up anytime soon. So I'm in no rush to do any type of deep dive into this because it's plastered all over the place, and there's other stories that I would like to discuss. And I'm sure you'd like to hear some other things as well. So we're going to do that. We are going to have a brief discussion here today in regards to the Mueller report, but there's some other things that I want to discuss. One such topic has to deal with, now we have Pocahontas out there. We told you this was coming. It was just a matter of time, and I am not surprised at all, and I'm sure you're not either, that it came from Pocahontas, and of course that's Senator Elizabeth Warren from the state of Massachusetts, coming out and saying that there must be a debt forgiveness regarding student loans, and that tuition for college at public universities should be free. We're going to have a nice, healthy discussion on that. The 2020 field is getting out of hand. We expected this. No surprise. There's likely to be others joining the fray. Right now it's up to 19 or 20, and that's likely to be added to maybe another one or two individuals getting in to the arena this week. Also, I want to talk about oil briefly. Typically, that's something we reserve for the economic podcast, but because this is such a geopolitical commodity, this ties in, so we're going to have a brief discussion there. And then lastly, we're going to have a discussion regarding the Yellow Vest riots in France. I'm actually going to start our conversation there because this is something that's it's on the periphery. It was an interesting observation over the past few days. Obviously, I'm sure many of you are aware that the Notre Dame Cathedral in France burned down, not entirely, but significant amount of damage. And there are calls by a lot of billionaires and pledges from billionaires to rebuild it and to provide the funding to rebuild it, which I think is a good thing. But here's the catch with it, at least in regards to the Yellow Vest protest movement. Now, of course, there is no centralized leadership when it comes to the Yellow Vest. This tends to be the case with a lot of political movements because a lot of the times it's just an organic uprising. It's just people being fed up with the system. It's the inequality that we talk about so much here. It's the populism on the rise that we talk about. It's everything coming together. So here's sort of an interesting take from at least some members of the Yellow Vests, because a lot of this stems from poor policy and an inequality that exists the world over. But obviously the French are upset with the French inequality that exists. So when you have a structure, as historic as it may be and as beautiful as it may be, obviously that's the Notre Dame Cathedral, these protesters, at least some of them, are pointing to this as an example. Look, we have people here in this country who are starving to death. We have pensioners, which are retired individuals who are struggling to make ends meet. And here we have the la-di-da billionaires out there saying, yes, I'm going to devote millions and millions and millions of dollars, whatever it takes, to rebuild stone, concrete, glass. You get the picture here? I mean, there's some rationality to it. Yes, you want to cherish the history. I've never been there. I can only imagine how beautiful that structure truly was in its form. I mean, I think it took, about a century for those craftsmen, those master craftsmen, to build that structure. I mean, it'd just be something for the eye to see. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. But looking at it from this standpoint of people, at least some, in the Yellow Vest movement saying, look, this is what we're talking about. We have people who are suffering. We have people who can't make ends meet. And here we have politicians and billionaires, the very people that they're blaming for these problems, seemingly more concerned about concrete and glass. Yes, it's historic. Yes, it's beautiful. But come on. That's their argument. It's an interesting one. And that sort of plays into how a lot of this goes right now. And it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. I would like to see Notre Dame built. I understand. I would like to see it restored and all that. But you have to understand in the context of what? if you truly have issues like this in France and other places around the world, what takes priority? So I think that's an interesting question. I think that is a legitimate question and concern for anybody to raise, specifically those who have been protesting. Again, there is no centralized leadership within the Yellow Vest movement, but there's at least some who are raising this and saying, come on, if you're going to do this, this is just going to energize at least this faction of the movement that much more. We're going to continue protesting because, look, it's the billionaires who are bailing out concrete and glass. Okay. Now, moving on to the Mueller report. I'm going to be as brief as I can with this because this is like Brexit. I don't want to talk it to death, but I mean, it's in the news. We're not going to talk about Brexit today, though, other than me just mentioning it there, so my apologies. But the Mueller report was out last Thursday, a redacted version. We know this. And already we have calls for impeachment of the president. Right back to square one we went. No surprise, same names, Jerry Nadler, even Elizabeth Warren came out, and we're going to talk about her a little bit more in regards to the 2020 race and her tuition forgiveness program. Maxine Waters, Jerry Nadler, Adam Schiff, Nancy Pelosi, they're all out there. Now, at least Nancy Pelosi, it's my understanding that she has had some conversations with the president, maybe trying to reach across party lines here to maybe get some infrastructure going. We talked about that. If there was anything that could be done between the Republicans and the Democrats and something that the president may be willing to sign, it would be infrastructure. So maybe there's some light at the end of the tunnel here to get that done. I remain skeptical. It's already April, the end of April, so call it May. By the time you get something done and the president signs off on it, there aren't any shovel-ready projects like we were told during the Obama years. There aren't any shovel-ready projects now. So how much longer is this going to take to kick into effect? But nevertheless, it would be in the right direction because we do have infrastructure that is in dire need that needs to be fixed. No question about it. So hopefully we can get some movement there. But don't hold your breath on that one. So particularly with the Mueller report, you have Jerry Nadler out there again, the Democrat, the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee coming out and saying to Chuck Todd of Meet the Press, yeah, I think the Mueller report says there's some stuff in there for grounds for impeachment. We can start that process. I mean, come on. Does he honestly believe this? Or is he just looking for brownie points from the mainstream media and some lunatics on the far left? I mean, do we really have to go down this path? Because the Mueller report was basically written up in 2 volumes. The first volume had to deal with what was really the legal argument of the whole thing, which had to deal with collusion, which is not a crime, and conspiracy, which could be a crime. Well, there was neither. There was no collusion, there was no conspiracy between President Trump, candidate Trump, the Russians, his campaign, his family, his organizations, nada. Okay? So that's basically put it in the drawer, end of story. We've known this. However, we've also been telling you that Bob Mueller was going to give an out. He was going to say, look, we knew this. We said there's not going to be some flattering things in there for the president and his administration. And there weren't, because Volume 1 was the legal argument with collusion and conspiracy. There's none. Volume 2 has to deal with obstruction of justice, or potentially obstruction of justice. And that is where Bob Mueller punted. He said, I'm not going to make the decision. Yes, you've paid us $30 million for a 2.5-year investigation. I'm a prosecutor. I'm a special prosecutor. You make that determination. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to give it to Rod Rosenstein and to Attorney General Bill Barr to make that decision. Well, they did make a decision, and they said there was no obstruction. But nevertheless, in the political world that we are in the 3-ring circus that we exist, this gave an opening, and a huge opening, for the mainstream media and for Democrats, especially the Looney Tunes, out there to come and say, yep, we can impeach him, or yep, he broke the law, obstruction of justice. What you also have to understand and keep not in the back of your mind, but in the front of your mind, is the fact that the president did not assert executive privilege. And a lot of the information that the mainstream media and the Democrats are clinging to and hanging their hats on now because they feel rejuvenated. They feel like they've been resurrected over the past weekend here because now they got him. He didn't break the law with, collusion and conspiracy, the whole thing that we've been told that, yeah, he's guilty as sin. He's going down. He's going down. Don Jr.'s going down. Ivanka. Everybody's going down. Well, not the case. But now we might have him on obstruction. That was always part of the argument too, but it was never the focal point because it was always the Russians, they're coming to get you. Not the case. So now they're hanging their hat on obstruction. They're not going to get anywhere with it. But just like they didn't get anywhere with collusion or conspiracy. This is how delusional they are. They have an agenda. If you didn't think they had an agenda before, now it's as plain as day. So what's going to happen? Well, we're in a three-ring circus. The Democrats are going to continue to investigate this president, his campaign, his administration, his organization, looking for his personal finances, everything. Finances of his organization. I believe the president, the White House, is suing Congress to prevent that from taking place, some of these financial disclosures. So there's no end in sight to where this is going. So that's why I'm skeptical and say don't hold your breath for any type of infrastructure bill or anything else for that matter, especially nothing of great import. I mean, infrastructure needs done, but it is not nearly as important as a lot of other issues that we bring up here on the Capitol News that needs to be front and center, but is not talked about by anybody. Democrat, Republican, the president, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Mitch McConnell. There is no leadership on the issues that need to be addressed. It's the three-ring circus. That's all it is. You have millions of Americans sitting around their kitchen tables, as they'd say, talking about real issues. I think most Americans are sick and tired hearing about Bob Mueller and this report. Now, there's most definitely people who are very interested in it. Some are very excited. Some may feel rejuvenated. There's no question that a lot of Democrats and members of the mainstream media feel rejuvenated because now they think they got him. Now they think they can go through Volume 2 of the Mueller report, again, dealing with obstruction of justice, and they can rattle off lie after lie, contradiction after contradiction, exaggeration after exaggeration. What member of the White House said what to whom, when? Did they listen to the president? The president said, maybe answer some of these questions this way, but they didn't. Oh, well, he was, trying to obstruct. I mean, come on, we can't have that. Because the other thing that comes into question now is some people are saying, well, there was no underlying crime. There was no collusion. There was no conspiracy. So how therefore can there be obstruction? Well, there can be because the investigators don't know until their conclusion. Okay? You can't mess with law enforcement. You can't have somebody going out there lying on your behalf or ordering them or telling them to lie or exaggerate, make false statements, anything. Now, if some of that stuff was said, well, how's that going to be dealt with? Well, that's what we're seeing. That's what we're in the midst of. I've defended this president and continue to defend this president on many fronts, particularly when it came to this witch hunt, which is the right classification of this. It has been for 2.5 years, and there's been nothing there. Mueller, in my opinion, knew this from the onset. I mean, he had to have, because I read a lot of the Lisa Page testimony, the former FBI attorney, that was dealing with this. They knew. They knew. Somebody knew. Hillary Clinton, they knew they weren't going to go after her. Jim Comey on July 5th comes out and throws the book at her. She's guilty of all this stuff, but we're not going to prosecute. There's nothing but speculation against candidate Trump and his campaign. Oh, yeah, that's the story of the century. That's what we got to do. We got to have an insurance policy. We got to potentially stage a coup. If this guy actually wins, he wins. Okay, the insurance policy has to be engaged. Now we got to stage a coup. We got to overthrow him. We got to use everything under the book to try to get them out of there. And now, 2.5 years after a special prosecutor, what is there? There's nothing. There's nothing. But Bob Mueller had to play nice because he was probably somehow, some way, well, at least his friends were, part of the insurance policy. So he had to throw him a bone. He said, sorry, guys, I got to do my job. I have this reputation of being this outstanding individual. We're already doing the wrong thing because they're in search of a crime. That's what they're doing. You're supposed to investigate crimes, not people. They've been investigating people here, the president in particular, for 2.5 years. That's not how it works here. So Bob Mueller at least was somewhat honorable there. I can't do it. I know you'd love for me to find something, but I just can't do it. But when it comes to obstruction of justice, well, we're lawyers. We can do double talk here. We can argue both sides of that coin. So I'll write this report and we'll give some feed, some fodder out there for the mainstream media and for some Democrats who want to go out there and say, yeah, we're going to continue to investigate and perhaps start impeachment process on this president. Now you have to remember, folks, impeachment is not a simple process, and it involves both the House and the Senate. It may get somewhere in the House. I am doubtful of that, but it might. It will not go anywhere in the Senate because the Senate would act as the jury. And the Senate is controlled by Republicans. And I would be very, very surprised if that happened, if they actually went through with it, if it gets through the House, which I'm very skeptical of that because of the politics of it. A lot of those names, the Maxine Waters of the world, the Jerry Nadlers, the Adam Schiffs of the world, they've dug in. They are in. They're ready to continue to investigate this president from every angle. Some of them are already calling for impeachment processes to begin and saying that what they know already from the Mueller report is an impeachable offense. So they're in. So some of their, I don't like to use the word credibility because they really don't have any, nor do Democrats care. I mean, they're some of the biggest hypocrites walking the planet, but they don't care because the ends justify the means. So they'll say and do what they have to because the ends justify the means. So they might walk it back, but it's highly unlikely at this point because they're dug in. So they're going to continue to investigate the president. There's going to continue to be calls for his impeachment. And this is what we're going to see. You'll see some of the statements which you've already had, I'm sure, if you watched 2 seconds of the news this weekend, of what the president said, according to other people, and what those people testified to. So, I mean, how much longer do we have to beat a dead horse? But this is what the Rachel Maddows, the Chuck Todds, the Anderson Coopers of the world, they're going to hang their hats on this, and they're going to continue doing so for the remainder of this year, if not into 2020. Again, the only way this will stop or at least slow down is if and when the president declassifies FISA documents, FBI 302s, the summary of interviews that took place during this investigation, during what may have happened under Clinton. And then we have the Office of Inspectors General. We have a couple of those reports due to come out this year. And again, sooner rather than later, we hope here at the Capitol News, because we're getting sick and tired of this being a one-way street. And it's just continuing to barrage the president. And if the president has some information, he really needs to release it for the sake of this country, because this can't go on. This is dividing the country, and nothing is getting done. Maybe you get infrastructure. We have a whole host of issues that aren't even being discussed. Mr. President, please, if you have information that can stop these guys in their tracks for the sake of the country, do it, and do it now. If you have a Trump card, put it on the table. Because if it's a true Trump card, it doesn't matter when you do it. You don't need to hold it for maximum effect. If it's a Trump card, you got it. Game, set, match, it's over. Two-tier justice system cannot exist in this country. If you have the information, lay it on the line. Wake the American people up. Don't play games. Don't be another politician. Don't be another standard politician. Do something to drain the swamp. Because I've said it here before. If this stuff does not start to happen, I'm giving the president till the end of summer. If he doesn't produce with some of this stuff, I'm going to say we've been conned. I'm going to say he's just like everybody else. I mean, I understand there's a process. I understand he's up against a huge machine. But, hey, at the end of summer, he only has a year to make something happen because it's election time. Is he really going to cling to the hope that people aren't paying attention and, you know, there's just lunatics on the other side? Well, American people will wake up and hang your hat on that, and then we'll go investigate and do all this other stuff after I'm reelected. I mean, it's just too big. It's too big of a moment in history to gamble with this many people's lives because this is serious stuff. Most people don't think it is, but it is. Believe me when I tell you. So that's the Mueller report. We will continue to have conversations on it. I'm sure I will do a deeper dive here, read some of it off to you guys, make some jokes about it because a lot of it's going to be laughable. But now moving on to oil, real quick. Oil. Obviously, we had the Iran deal that Trump did not like. He was claiming it was the worst deal ever. That was one of his, 2016 campaign talking points. So they undid the Iranian deal. Well, part of that had to deal with trading with Iran, not the United States, but some other countries around the world. And there was a waiver that was set in place on behalf of the United States, which basically allowed, quote unquote, allowed other countries to import Iranian oil. Well, they gave a deadline to that, and that deadline is coming up very soon here. And we were told by Secretary of State Mike Pompeo that that deadline is going to expire. So those waivers are no longer going to exist for several countries. One of them, I believe, is China. So it's interesting because we're in the midst of some, high-level trade deals, which we've been in for the past year. Again, another story I'm hoping that wraps up here pretty soon because I'm getting sick and tired of talking about that too. But you now have, as a side effect of this, a direct consequence of this, you now have oil prices jumping. And follow me on the economic podcast. We're going to go into that a little bit further. But, I mean, what's the president want? Does he want higher oil prices? Is he trying to be a tough guy now? What's he going to do? Because you can't have a whole bunch of Americans who are already debt-ridden reaching further and further into their pocket to fill up their gas tank. Just can't do it. I mean, it's something somewhere has got to give. It's just a matter of time. So there's a whole bunch of things going on. Follow us on the Economic Podcast. We're going to have a little bit deeper conversation on that. In regards to Pocahontas now coming out in regards to tuition forgiveness, I'm not even going to go into great detail with her plan because what I will eventually do on this podcast, once we're really in the heat of things with the 2020 campaign and most everybody is in the race, hopefully there's only a few more entering because that'll put us over 20-some people. I will go in, I will look at their platform, I will look at their plans, and I will go in and do an analysis of them one by one. Don't do it. Wait for me, because it will lower your IQ. I will take the hit. I will take the hit. Just wait for me, okay? Don't go on their website and looking up all this crap. We got plenty of time. Don't save your brain cells. I will take the hit. I'll read this crap, I'll do some analysis, and I will give you my commentary. That's what I will do for you, okay? Don't read it. Do not lower your IQ. If you have somebody you don't like, they're already a little slow in the head, you want them to go read it, I don't care. But you don't do it. Don't do it, all right? Tuition forgiveness. How is she going to do it? Well, she has a wealth tax, of course. We just needed Pocahontas to make her way through the wilderness. Okay? She broke up with John Smith. She's done with him. Now she has been awakened. And now she is enlightening the people, the public, on how everything is going to be fine and how all of this stuff is going to be paid for. Well, we're just going to tax the ultra-rich. That's it. That's it. This woman, she worked at Harvard. Why isn't Harvard out condemning this woman? Why isn't a math professor from Harvard coming out and saying, no, you can't. It's just basic math. Why isn't there an elementary teacher who teaches mathematics coming out from Massachusetts or anywhere and saying, no, you can't do it. There's not enough money from these people to pay for Medicare for all, tuition forgiveness, free tuition, free child care. I mean, come on. You think there's that many ultra-wealthy people in here? And she's talking about taxing. She's not talking about complete confiscation, thank God, of their entire net wealth. She's just talking about an additional tax on their net worth, which is ridiculous in and of itself. How she thinks that that's enough money to pay for all this stuff, and then she's not even talking about Social Security. I mean, come on. Give me a break. This woman is off her rocker. But she's a desperado right now. She's a desperado because her poll numbers are going down. And that's why she was out this weekend saying the president needs to be impeached. The House needs to start the impeachment process. She's looking for airtime. She needs to, quote-unquote, revive her campaign. I told you, she's done. President Trump knocked her off her rocker a long time ago. She's done. She's done with all of this Pocahontas stuff. She's dead. How she doesn't realize it is the fact that she's a lunatic. I mean, some people, you can just look at them, look into their eyes, and you know something's amiss. Well, look into this woman's eyes. Don't stare for too long, but take a look. I mean, you don't have to be on this planet for that long of a period to have enough encounters with enough people to know something ain't right when you look into somebody's eyes. Look into hers, again, not for a very long time, but something ain't right. And then when you hear the words come out of her mouth in regards to one policy after the next, confirmation, something isn't right with this woman. Okay? Thank goodness President Trump already defeated her before her campaign even started. But that's not going to stop her from coming out into the news and saying that he needs to be impeached. Whether or not she believes it, I think she's just looking for attention because she needs to stay in the limelight. And now she's out there calling for free tuition and tuition forgiveness. Student loans, just to remind you, is over $1.5 trillion. $1.5 trillion in student loans. For context, we have auto loans that are $1.1 trillion. So student loans are more than that. And then we have, let's see here, credit card debt, which is about the same, 1.1. So student loans take the cake. Now, this is because these students have been sold a bill of goods. By whom? The government. Yet somehow the government thinks they can solve the problem. And of course, I'm talking about the lunatics of 2020. In this case, Senator Elizabeth Warren, also known as Pocahontas. So where's the end going to be? My question is the following. What about the people who've paid off their student loans? I mean, they did the right thing, did they not? The quote-unquote right thing? At least that's what we're told. If you take debt out, I mean, it's your responsibility to pay for it. I went to school. I went to grad school. My student loans are paid for. I paid them off. Am I going to get a check from Uncle Sam and from some of these ultra-rich people? Why would you pay off your debt? Didn't you know it was going to be forgiven? Didn't you know it was supposed to be free? Am I going to get a check for all that back? I'm just talking about the debt. I mean, thank God I had some scholarship money too. But I mean, am I serious? Am I going to get a check? Is Elizabeth Warren going to say that the people who did the quote-unquote right thing and paid off their student debt, are they going to be reimbursed because that was a mistake? You shouldn't have paid it off because it should have been free. I mean, I could have used that money to go backpacking through Europe for a few months, maybe for a year. I could have rented a Winnebago and went coast to coast in the United States. Could have taken some time off. I mean, I wasn't just paying the minimum balance either. I was paying that thing off because I understand what debt is and how damaging it can be. So I did the right thing. Am I going to be reimbursed? Because all of these students now are going to say, well, thank God. Thank God I have $10, $15, $20, $50,000 in debt. Just wipe the slate clean. I mean, we'll go into, like I said, further detail as to what her plan entails. But it's ridiculous on the face of it, just from the principle of it. This is another bailout. I am not for bailouts of anybody. I'm not for bailouts of the banks 10 years ago and counting, by the way, because that's what quantitative easing is. It's a continual bailout. Again, the largest wealth transfer in the history of mankind, continuing to bail out big corporations, the government, and major banks. You're not getting bailed out. Now, they're trying to bail this out, but that isn't right either. Where's the responsibility? Where are the people who are supposed to be doing the right thing? Are the people who did the right thing, are they going to get screwed again? Because they did the right thing. They now have less money in their pocket than they otherwise would if they were to be reimbursed. I mean, how can you even make sense of any of this? How can you take any of these people seriously? And that's a serious question for people who are Democrats out there, and I know I have Democratic and progressive listeners because I've received some comments, and I'm glad you guys are here. I really am, because I don't just want to preach to the choir. I mean, seriously, how can you take anything these people say seriously? Because personally it affects you, because you have some student debt, and you're like, oh, thank God it's going to be forgiven. At what expense? Do you care that it affects somebody else somewhere else down the line? That somebody may have worked their butt off to pay off their debt because they didn't want to have it, and you just get to walk in at the right time and have it forgiven? How does that make any sense? Is that fair? Some questions to ponder. Who's actually paying for it? Do you actually think there's enough money from the ultra-wealthy to be taxed that can forgive $1.5 trillion and counting? Where did you go to school? Maybe you should go to the university and say, I want my money back because you can't solve that basic math problem. I mean, this is getting ridiculous. This is the level of our education system. And if people are actually falling for this, God help us all. God help us all. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's where I'm going to wrap it up today. This conversation is most definitely going to continue because it's just too important. There's too many details to get into. But we're going to go there because we have to, because our republic is on the precipice. It's a three-ring circus any way you look at it, and enough is enough. So thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure having you as always. Please like, share, subscribe, get the word out, leave your comments. I would love to hear from you. This is the Capital News. I am Alex Karitis. Godspeed.